Okay, so this is now very different because I'm not going to talk about a specific case or a specific company, but as I do more about abstract terminology, and many of you maybe who know me know that this is kind of my favorite. And but I think it's important because if, especially in challenging times right now, we talk about trust, we should be really sure what we are actually talking about and where the problem of trust might be at the moment, or why trust might be important in a special way at the moment. And so I picked talking about trustworthiness and trustfulness and their relationship, because I think it's very important, and we often confound them when we talk about trust, and that might make it difficult for us to see the actual problem. So starting with trustworthiness, I've put here a quote from Honora O'Neill, who of course has written great work on trust, especially in relations to the media and so on. And she gave a TED talk some time ago in which she told, maybe somewhat provocatively for trust researchers, trust is not always good. Only trust in the trustworthiness is good. You know, with this kind of statement, she maybe ridiculed us a little bit because we're often so naive about trust. But what she says, of course, seems to be blatantly obvious and very, very acceptable. However, there's a big problem with that and with her statement, which I also pointed out to her, because the trustworthiness of others is actually what we don't know about, what we cannot be sure about. And there's this specific thing about trust, that we have uncertainty. And so trustworthiness is not easy to just gauge and then act on it like a rational choice model of trust would suggest. The big problem is, how do we actually know how trustworthy somebody actually is, and what level of trustworthiness do we actually need for us to be actually prepared to trust? And so we have to turn the spotlight away from the trustee back to the trustor and really ask ourselves, what is the trustor's contribution to trust? Not just the trustee who has to be trustworthy. The trustor has to be trustful. In Georg Simmel's words, maybe again, a few of you watching this will know that this is my favorite author on trust. In his words, trusting is about believing in somebody. It's this element of faith, this quasi-religious element, or the leap of faith that trust involves, which the trustor has to make, not the trustee. And we should think more about where this kind of belief is coming from, if it's not only coming from the trustworthiness of the trustee, probably. So let's think about this standard survey question. Do you think most people can be trusted? This question has been used in surveys since the late 40s. And this question seems to, again, put the spotlight on the trustee, not the trustor. If somebody says, yes, I think most people can be trusted, does that actually mean that this person is giving us an assessment of other people's trustworthiness? Or doesn't it really tell us something about how much they are prepared to trust? So consider alternative formulations of the standard question. Do you think most people are willing to trust? I think that is also a very interesting survey question one should ask, not just the other one at the top that has been the standard one. I want to know more about what we also think about whether others are actually willing to trust, so trustfulness there. But maybe the most important question should be, are you mostly willing to trust? And several researchers, including Eric Uslana, have said that the question at the top, do you think most people can be trusted, actually doesn't tell us anything about the trustworthiness of most people, but of the trustfulness, of the willingness to trust of those who answer the question. And here, the positive answer, yes, I'm mostly willing to trust, has a lot to do with your own confidence and with your own resources and your own ability to cope also with disappointments. And speaking of disappointments, let's look at this chart quickly and ask ourselves, which is the worst error, the type 1 error where an A trusts an unworthy B, or the type 2 error when an A distrusts a trustworthy be? Of course, Mark, forgive me for just putting trust and distrust next to each other like they were, you know, end of a continuum or simple choices. Of course, we all try to respect that distrust is a distinct concept, but just for the sake of the discussion here, if this is the kind of choice people have, what would be the which side should you be erring on? And we often find people are erring on caution. They prefer to make the type 2 error rather than the type 1 error. But I think that might actually be a mistake. I think, and a lot of authors have thought about this a long time ago. There are a lot of statements about whether you should, if in doubt, you should try trust or not. Think of Axelrod's experiments and simulations where tit for tat came out saying it's better to risk the type 1 error rather than the type 2 error, because otherwise you're going to lose a lot of opportunities of interaction. I know Bart Noteboom recently has written a blog again thinking about, is trust always good? No, of course it is not. But his conclusion has also been that at the end of the day, it's better to try trust than to go for distrust. And we also just received a paper at the Journal of Trust Research, and I can't reveal the author, of course, because it's still under review, saying we should consider all the research again that points about this, is trust generally a good idea or not? And if we of course, it's not always a good idea, but generally speaking, when in doubt, probably we should avoid the type 2 error and not the type 1 error. So just here an illustration. Maybe in the discussion later, we can think about this, which one is worse? Of course, it depends a lot on a lot of things. Again, we need to put the spotlight back on the trustor. It's very important, and Ross, you've been co-authoring a paper in JTR on individual propensity to trust. We need to bring that back into trust research. At the very early days of trust research, this has been a very central idea. Perceived trustworthiness, yes, is one thing in the equation. Then, of course, personal experience. Have you recently been disappointed or not? It's very important to talk about people's willingness to trust. But I think the most important aspect is vulnerability, which is a condition for trust to be relevant, but which is experienced very subjectively by the trustors. And we need to investigate more and talk a lot about more. What kind of vulnerability are people experiencing? Also at the moment with the pandemic, are they maybe less willing to trust because they really feel vulnerable? Or are they less willing to trust because they think somebody is not trustworthy anymore? I think that is the core question here. At the end of the day, but at the title of my talk says, trustworthiness and trustfulness, maybe we have to think of them together. And because my time is short here, let's just say that there is, of course, an interaction. When you communicate benevolence as part of your trustworthiness, you are encouraging the other to become more trustful. And when you are signaling to somebody that you are trustful, that you are relying on them, there's also research going back a long time showing that you can actually kind of make people trustworthy by trusting them. And this kind of interaction, which really also involves communication and not just kind of cognitive processes that are not connected, should enable us to talk about trust more productively, especially in challenging times, and seeing it is at an interplay of trustworthiness and trustfulness. Last comment, of course, Honora O'Neill's statement also, she concluded at the end, or her conclusion is that those who want to be trusted have to convince others that they are trustworthy. They have to offer something so that they are seen as trustworthy. And that's especially for the media, government, and other authorities. Thanks so much for your attention. It's not easy to get into this kind of positive cycle, just do it. But I look forward to your questions and comments, and I hope that this abstract discussion is going to help us talk about what's actually going on in the world.